My guest today is writer-producer Rebekah Weigel. Now, she began her career in the field of psychology, which informed her eventual work in the entertainment industry. Now, with a strong sense of story, strategy, and ability to rally, she writes and produces with her husband Joshua, bringing powerful and spiritually significant stories to the screen. Now, her work includes the critically acclaimed short film The Butterfly Circus, which became a viral phenomenon, impacting countless lives around the world and winning over 35 film festival awards, including the esteemed Clint Eastwood Filmmaker Award presented by Clint Eastwood at the Carmel Film Festival. Now, Rebekah is also a foster adoptive parent and has become a fierce advocate for the reversal of the foster crisis in America. And this work led her to co-write Sound of Hope, the true story of Possum Trot, an independent feature film aimed at ending the foster crisis. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our guest today, writer, producer Rebekah Weigel, and her film Sound of Hope, the true story of Possum Trot, to the show. Welcome, Rebekah.
Yes, thank you for having me on today.
Well, how did you come across the story about Pastor Martin and his wife, and where is Possum Trot, Texas located?
Yeah, well, we adopted our children, two of our children in 2013, and I was working to try to get more churches engaged in the foster crisis in Los Angeles and came across this story. And it really impacted me deeply because we were in the trenches with our own kids and adoption and really adjusting as a family and really wishing we had more support, to be honest. And as people of faith, we step forward because we're Christians and because the Bible calls us to care for the orphans. And so seeing this whole community do this together and step in as a church and support one another, I really, I feel like this is what needs to happen and what we're called to and what we're capable of and what the church is capable of. And it just highlights the beauty of the church. And the world took notice when the church stepped forward and did what we're called to do. So that's how we got connected with the story. And, we actually eventually ended up moving our family here to Deep East, Texas to really immerse ourselves in the community and learn more about the characters and the story. So we're in near Possum Trot, right on the Louisiana border in Deep East, Texas. We're still
Oh,
here
I
today.
love that. And I love the fact that you and your husband truly put the word into practice. And, we don't see a whole lot of that today in certain areas, but, taking care of the orphans, taking care of the widows, that takes everything that you have to have. And the biggest thing is faith in God to fill in the blanks and fill in the spaces when we step forward like that. But since you and your husband Joshua are foster adoptive parents, did you learn anything new about the foster care system that you didn't know before while working on this film?
Well, we've been working on the film for 8 years. So, yeah. And we've learned so much throughout the process. And really, our faith has deepened our respect for this small church and what they were able to accomplish and just the sense of family. I mean, when we moved here, the whole church wrapped around our family and prayed for us and prayed for our house and just brought us in, and we get to fellowship with them. And they really are such an example to us. I think we're missing a lot of that today in the church, to be honest. I mean, we haven't encountered that level of community and family in other churches that we've been a part of. And we long for that, like deeper community within the church so that we can do hard things, step into hard things and feel like, hey, the church has our back and we're going to be supported in this process.
I completely agree with you 110%. I think the churches today need to be much more heavily community minded. I know everybody wants to reach
Right.
the world. Some of them lean on being the famous side, but it's the community that matters the most. And you've said it, and I agree. But there's something about this film, and I'll tell you, Rebekah, fell in love with this film. One of the
Good.
best I've seen so far this year on many
Wow.
different levels. But what I loved about your writing was that you didn't sugarcoat the difficulties of taking in a foster child. What do
Mhm.
prospective foster parents need to know before fully committing their lives to being parents to the parentless?
Well, I think they'll see it within the film because, as you said, like we were committed to telling this honestly. And as foster adoptive parents, and I've worked with so many foster adoptive parents, and it's not easy. And we didn't want to call people into something and make it look easy, and then have them be disillusioned. And so we thought, let's show the reality of how difficult it is, especially to care for children that have been in the system a long time or that are older, that have more trauma. But who else is more equipped to do that than the church? Like, we have everything we need. We have the community, we have the Holy Spirit, we have his power. I mean, so, we wanted to show that it was difficult, but show that we can do it and leave people with hope, leave people inspired. And that is what's happening. And we're so excited to see people walking out of theaters inspired and moved to tears and saying, hey, how do I get involved? And so it's doing what we hoped and prayed that it would do.
There's a scene in the film which I highly appreciated when Donna was moved to adopt. And it's a feeling that many people, as you know, probably have. It's the feel good, I'm doing something great moment. But then the reality sets in. And this is
Right.
contrasted with that one scene where Donna broke down and became the opposite of what her original intention was, and shows how difficult it can be to take on troubled kids, where just for that moment, she wanted to give up. Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely behind closed doors had similar conversations at times where it's just, you go from having, a pretty easy life to voluntarily stepping into to difficulty and challenge. And I think that's what God's calling us to. And he's saying, trust me, it's better over here. It might be more difficult, it might be harder. It's like working out or anything else. It's like, seems easier to stay home on the couch and eat your potato chips, right? But when you go to the gym and you do the hard work, it pays off. And I think it's the same when we trust God and we obey him and we walk and follow him into difficulty and hard places. You're in the middle of it going, what have I done? I wish I was still sleeping. But it's so fruitful. I mean, anything of value comes with a great cost. And when we follow him into these hard places, I think it's changing the church. I mean, the churches that I see that are really in the trenches, God's moving in those churches. I mean, there is a desire for him. There's a passion for him. There's that only comes through struggle and difficulty when we really need him, because we're, in a place where we can't do it on our own.
Very much so. And it was, I'm not going to say funny, haha. But as I was doing my own devotions this morning, and I was doing a devotion based on perseverance, don't give up. You've got to push through
Wow.
the valleys. And like you said, the trenches. And the picture of Christ carrying his own cross to Calvary entered my mind. And I'm like, what if he gave up? What if he said he
Mm.
couldn't do it? Where would we
Wow.
be? And
Mm.
that's something when I watch the film Possum Trot, that they went through every difficulty. And here's the thing I appreciated about the film. You showed these little nuggets. There's difficulties. There were words that were said that I know that
Mm-hmm.
if they come out of someone's mouth as a parent to an adoptive child, they want to take them back. They know
Right.
that they're speaking from their own, I guess, I don't want to say frailty, but maybe a bit of shortcomings. But then, maybe a tense moment shows up and they say something they really shouldn't have. And then the foster child is just like, this is no different than
Mm-hmm.
where I came from. And you did not sugarcoat anything in this beautiful film. And that's why this film is so powerful. Now, for you,
Mm.
when you met the Martins, what was your observation about them firsthand by taking on the toughest cases in the foster care system? Did they realize what they were taking on?
I don't think they did at first. I mean, I think really God spoke to First Lady Donna Martin and said, give back, foster and adopt. And she trusted him, and she, just followed and obeyed. And they, I think the Lord had prepared them in advance. They have a special needs son that is severely disabled. And, and they'll even say this, they feel like they were prepared for this moment through their life with Princeton and caring for Princeton, because, that was challenging in and of itself. And then they took on kids that had some of the most, they took on some of the most difficult cases themselves. Their family did. And so, I mean, but I see how God has refined them in the process and shaped them and changed them. And it's like, I want to be like that. We all want to be like that. We look up to people, admire people that have been through really challenging things. But that's because God shaped them in the process of their obedience and saying yes.
Well, yeah, it's like when David took down Goliath. He was already being trained and prepared for that fight while he was a shepherd boy. He was fighting off
Right.
bears and lions. And if you can fight that off and have the confidence and the courage to do so, standing before a giant in your life is not going to be that much harder. We
Yes.
just have to rely on the power in heaven that stands behind us with fiery chariots. And we just have to realize that God is on our side. One thing about Pastor Martin that impressed me was that he stepped out in great faith and with nothing to he convinced his whole church to do the same. And I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine the amount of pressure he must have felt in the early beginning of this journey, because it wasn't just him taking in two kids. He was encouraging his whole church to do the exact same thing. So because you even showed this in the film where he even took on that burden of his whole congregation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, the Martins did like really more than probably anyone in the church. People would drop their kids off when they were having a hard time or they were struggling, and they would just take them in. I mean, there's one child that actually stayed with them for almost a year when the parents were struggling. And so they took this seriously, this idea of bearing one another's burdens. And they do, and in smaller communities, a lot of times that's just part of life. And it's something I think we're missing in today's day and age where, we're online and we're connected to so many people, but are we really like supporting one another in deep, meaningful ways where we feel each other's support beyond just an encouraging little comment or word or
Well, when you were doing the research for this film, because what really amazed me is here's a church in an area that's not even considered a town. It's just basically considered an establishment. And we have those around where I live. And for a place that is located on the map, that is in the deep, deep part of East Texas, how did the foster care, I don't know what you would call it, foster care system, foster care department of that area of Texas, what was their thought of this whole area wanting to take in these kids? Because it's not like saying, "Hey, we have a church in Houston or in Dallas."
Yeah.
We're out in the sticks with dirt roads.
Yeah, I think at first it was a little like they weren't sure. And I think we showed that a little bit in the film. But, the more they started taking in kids, the more they started seeing like, wow, this is a resource. Like, we haven't really looked at these rural communities as resources. A lot of times we talk about the foster crisis and the problems in the big cities, but we don't realize that the rural communities are full of small communities and churches that are, they're closed communities. And so there's a lot of support. There's resources there that they started to realize they could tap into. And some of the kids were being sent all the way from Houston to help with the crisis in Houston. So they were, and this really did change child welfare for the better. I mean, and we're hoping the film highlights it again and helps, because there's different states right now that are, nervous working with churches. And, there's some barriers being put up right now for the churches to engage. And we're hoping that this blows a lid off of that and really shows the world, shows CPS across the country, the church can be a solution to the foster crisis. And we need to remove barriers that are in the way of churches, not put barriers up.
I completely agree. Now, as a foster parent, as I was watching this film, and I love the way that you wrote the story and portrayed Pastor Martin, because there were, you know, he was not only a pastor in this film, he was a father. And he was using fatherly instincts that the Lord would want us to use. And as a foster parent yourself, I guess the greatest attributes that you really have to lean into is love is number one, and then patience, and then as time goes by, gaining the trust of the child.
Yeah. And perseverance. I think sticking with it when it gets hard, because after years of dealing with similar issues and, struggles, you can get weary in doing good. And I think we really need perseverance in this. And that's something I love about this community, is that they were so deeply committed to these kids, no matter what. And they, we show Donna, First Lady Donna getting weary and struggling internally, but really the truth, this community was so committed to these kids, and they were not going to give up, and they were not going to send them back. And there's cases even that we didn't get to touch on where, like, a family, they passed away actually, and 5 kids were left orphaned again. And another family in the community stepped forward and said, hey, we'll take all the kids. And so they kept them within the community. Like, no matter what, it was like, we're going to keep them in the community. We're not going to let them go back to the system. We're not giving up on these kids, which we need that, and these kids need that. They need people who won't give up on them.
I would have almost wanted to see that scene.
I know.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful, Rebekah.
Yeah, I know. There was a lot of things that we had to cut because, you're telling 22 family stories and 77 kids, and how do you tell all that? There is a book that Focus on the Family did called Small Town Big Miracle that goes into a lot of the backstories of the different families and what the different families faced.
Well, in the movie, there's a scene when Pastor Martin goes to a much larger church for help. It's said that it's the attitude of many ministries today. They look at their budget and their action of faith is dead. I mean, the Bible says the Lord owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills, so he's not limited to a budget that we create. But when we fail to believe, when we fail to do what the Bible says, then we don't move forward. Why was that scene so important to include in the film?
Yeah, and that's actually the director played the pastor. He's my husband. So co-writer, producer, and director. And that scene was really important to us. And it was risky, to be honest. I mean, a lot of the faith-based distributors that we approached initially said, there's no way we're going to do this with that scene in there. I mean, you're going to offend your core audience. You have to take it out. And we prayed and we really sought the Lord, and we felt like it needed to be in there. And I've worked with a number of churches around this issue. And I think it's an issue that, I mean, we didn't, it wasn't heavy-handed, but I think it just puts up a little bit of a mirror to us as believers, saying, where are your priorities? Like, what is important to you? Are you following what Jesus called us to do? Or are your priorities possibly in the wrong places? And I think it's good to have those checks every once in a while to just see, where are we at? How are we doing? And so we fought to keep that in, and we're just grateful that Angel Studios was our partner, because they really got the vision for helping us start a movement. We have an impact campaign alongside the film with a website to get people involved, and they were all in with that. And with that scene in particular, they said, we're going to put it for our guild, and the guild loved it. It actually was the highest testing film that Angel has ever put before their guild. So we didn't have any pressure from them to take out some of those more controversial scenes or tone down, some of the traumatic elements that we felt were necessary to really move people's hearts towards the kids.
I agree with you because when I watched the scene, it reminded me of how powerful the Apostle Paul was when he would write letters to the churches. And,
Mm,
and he wouldn't really apologize for having strong wording because it's like, do you realize who you are serving? Do you
yeah.
realize who God is and that, he's watching us? So, and in a way, sometimes we need that message of you need to straighten up. And so I was so happy that you not only put that scene in the film, you left it in the film because I think every now and then, look, I know ministers and pastors and evangelists when they first get called, they are passionate, they're excited, but as the years go by, the human
Hmm.
element starts to creep in, and then they end up being part of the system. But I love the way that you just kind of you put the jolt back in to show this is why you were called in the first place. And
Yeah.
so it was a very strong moment. It was a great moment. But I also loved that Possum Trot, it was not preachy at all. And because
Hmm.
this is a film that can reach a very wide demographic
Yeah.
with filmmaking like this, how can a film
Hmm.
be used for advocacy without being preachy?
Yeah, that was a challenge for us because we set out to make a tool to reverse the foster crisis and to impact hearts and move people to action. But we didn't want it to be preachy, and we've never felt drawn or called to the typical faith-based audience. Like, we really see media as a tool to reach the world, reach outside of the church. I mean, we want to reach the church, of course. We want to see churches rise up. But this film is testing really well with people who don't identify as having any faith. And they're actually coming out of theaters in tears saying, if church was like that, I would go to church. And that's been one of the most powerful things for me, has been watching people who do not identify as being Christian or having faith really being moved by this film. And I think just feeling the Holy Spirit moving their heart, saying, this is true religion. And true religion is appealing. True religion calls them and beckons them, like, there's something in my heart that's longing for this, and they're wanting to be a part of it. And some of them are even saying, I gave up on the church a long time ago. I stopped going to church, but I've decided after watching it, I want to go back to church. So this is I think, a unique opportunity for the church to step into that and say, okay, here we are, and we do care about the things that are on God's heart. And I think it will draw people.
I do too. And it goes back to what you said before. When churches focus on the actual community, they will do
Mm-hmm.
far more work, bigger work for the Lord than trying to focus on reaching, people across the United States through a televised service. Focus on
Yeah.
where you're planted because there are so many people that we can reach. I mean, my brother-in-law is a pastor, has a very great church, and when you leave the parking lot, he has a sign while you're sitting there waiting to get back onto the main road. The sign says, "You are now entering the mission field."
Yes.
And we need to realize our own community is the mission field. Uh, I have to ask, what did the Martins think when they saw the film for the first time?
Yeah, I think the first time was a little bit of, they were just processing so much stuff because it isn't like the stories in the past. A lot of people have come out and told the story, and it's very hallmarky. And at the end, Walmart shows up with trucks, and there's a big bow at the end. And we had warned them that we really felt like we wanted to tell it in a little bit more of an authentic, truthful way, because the truth of it is that it was really hard. The truth of it is, even the kids, I mean, these kids had lost everything. They lost their biological parents. They'd been through extreme trauma. They come into a community that really wasn't equipped at first and trained, and so it was a hard situation for everyone involved. And we wanted to show that, and also so that a lot of times with foster care and adoption, people think, well, I'm not ready for something like that. I could never do that. Those people are heroes. Those people are special. And that's just not the case. I mean, you know, when you step into fostering and adopting, like, you don't feel equipped, you don't feel prepared. I don't know if you ever will be. You know, I had a master's degree in psychology and had read all the books, but they have something that I didn't have. They had this strong, tight knit community of believers caring for one another. So I think we really want to just, you know, show the real thing. And so at first I think that was a little bit shocking, but they love it. And they have said they wouldn't change a thing about it. And their favorite part is the end, where all their kids and all the community, they get to see them and the fruit of their labors.
Yeah, and I love that you put that in there, and I'm sure that you had many hours and days of talking to a lot of those kids that are now adults. What were some of the things that they had told you uh, growing up in Possum Trot?
Yeah, we used a lot of their experiences throughout the film. I mean, we really tried to make it as truthful as possible and honor the kids' perspective. We talked with a lot of the kids and heard their stories and heard how they felt. You know, because a lot of times films like this also will just show the kids as bad, rather than they're internally wrestling with identity issues and struggling to love themselves and you know, believe in themselves. So the kids have responded very, very positively. I mean, we just had a screening in Center, Texas last night, actually, for the community and for the kids and the families of Possum Trot. And one, you know, after the other, the kids were just coming up and hugging me and crying and telling me, thank you, thank you, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for telling our side of the story too. And, you know, really, I think they all felt really heard in the process of this, making this film.
Well, I will say this, Rebecca, it is an absolute beautiful film. Anywhere
Thank you.
from the highest quality
Mm,
cinematography, the storyline, the acting, everything about this film is a 5 star. And it is that
wow, thank you.
good. And ladies and gentlemen, Sound of Hope, the true story of Possum Trot, is literally a must see film. Look, the fight for the kids begins, well, July 4th. So the powerful true story follows Donna and Reverend Martin as they ignite a fire in the hearts of their rural church to embrace kids in the foster system that nobody else would take. Now, by doing the impossible, adopting 77 children, this East Texas community proved that with real determined love, the battle for America's most vulnerable can be won. Now, I want to leave you with something that is in the film, but I want you to really listen because this is extremely important. It blessed me. I had tears. I had tears in my eyes when I saw this scene, and it says, "Look, we say we believe, and we'll follow
Mhm.
him wherever he leads. Truth is, you don't even know if you have faith until something weighs down with all its might. Then you'll see what's
Mm.
inside, and when you fall into that place, well, you will become like the one who leads you, or you will find you never knew him." Sound of Hope. The true story of Possum Trot is a story that shows what life is like when you choose to live life to serve others in the trenches and in the valleys. The Lord is looking for more who will love his children through the good times and through the tough times. And as the word says, love never gives up. Rebecca, I want to thank you so much for sharing the film Possum Trot with us
Mhm.
today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. And I hope everyone can go out this weekend, put some time aside from the festivities, and go out with your friends and family and support this film. And I promise you'll be inspired and full of hope when you leave the theater.
You will, and ladies and gentlemen, you may want to have a tissue or two on hand because there's many moments in this film that you're gonna relate to, and for all of you parents out there, I will guarantee you this: when you see this film, you're gonna look at your own children in a different way, and you're gonna look at things like, oh, I need to be doing that. This film will literally make you a better parent. So I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, and you can catch all the replays of our interviews. And in this case, in two areas, the Dr. Ward Bond Show, as well as Bond on Cinema. Both are available on YouTube, as well as our top dozen audio platforms. And as for me, remember, go see The Sound of Hope, the true story of Possum Trot in theaters starting July 4th. Go see it. Take your family, take your friends. It's going to be the best film you see all year. And as for me, I'll see you next time.